all you glorious gamers out there. Welcome to the PlayersToo Podcast, the video game podcast for gamers like you, by gamers like you. You can find PlayersToo on all the social media, that's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com, that's PlayerStoo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And while you're over there, if you could leave us a little review as well, again, it just helps us out even more. And thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. It genuinely means a huge amount to us. Alright, and on with the show. My name is Mark Henderson, and with me as always for this special edition of the PlayersToo Podcast, Mr. Lewis Camley.
Hello, good to see you again, Mark. How you doing?
Not bad at all. Lewis, we're doing Desert Island Games again, but it's your turn this time round.
It is indeed, yeah. I've been waiting almost a whole year, I realised, since we did your Desert Island Games for the return leg, for me to do my own. I'm quite excited about this, actually. I've got a bit of energy for it.
Nice one, man. Well, the reason why we're doing this is the same reason why we did the last one, is because as you listen to this, dear listeners, I will be on holiday and Lewis's horrendous work schedule will be over, so we are taking a break. And we decided that we would have a bit of fun with this episode out of time, so we're recording this a couple of weeks before you will listen to it. But for anyone that doesn't know, Desert Island Games is based on the very famous British radio show Desert Island Discs, the premise of which is asking guests what 8 records they would take with them if they were cast away to a desert island, basically as a means to interview the person about their life, effectively. We are going to do the same thing here with Lewis, asking him what 8 games he would take away if he were trapped on a desert island. It's worth pointing out that this isn't necessarily Lewis's top 8 games of all time. You might rather take a game that is more suited to being played on a desert island, I guess, as opposed to something that is a very short experience, you know. It could also be something that you have more nostalgia for, or that just like holds a special place in your heart for whatever reason. On this island, we're also saying that there is a fantasy console and a fantasy TV so that you can play whatever game you want and it will look exactly how you want it to look. We're not getting bogged down in hardware or anything like that or how we're going to play it. There is a fantasy console there that plays every single game under the sun with a fantasy TV that will output exactly what you want. So we're not bogging down in any of that nonsense. When it comes to online games, we are also saying that there are fantasy servers. So every lobby is full whenever you want a game, regardless of how old that game is. And in terms of communication, I'm going to say that if it is important to the game, you are allowed to communicate with your team, I would say, in multiplayer games, but only for gaming critical communications. You can't just have a wee blether with them because you have supposed to be on a desert island, you know. Not that I think that's going to be a problem for Lewis Camley, but maybe he'll surprise me.
I don't think that I will.
But Lewis, before we get into that, give us a little breakdown of who Lewis Camley is as a gamer, maybe a little bit of your history with video games. Regular listeners might already know this, but worth reiterating, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So I guess my gaming journey started when I was about 4 years old. I think before that point I'd had a sort of hand-me-down Sega Master System from a family friend, but, you know, it was kind of just a toy more than a games console at that point. You know, me and my sister would kind of play the odd game that we had. Most clearly in my memory from that period is like Asterix and Obelisk and kind of stuff like that.
Christ, I remember playing that years. God almighty, that was so long ago.
I guess my journey proper began with the purchase of a PlayStation 1 back in, I think it was 1996 or 7 at Christmas, and we both got our first PS1 at the same time on the same day.
We did indeed.
As you said when we did this show last year, a lot of my gaming history from that point on, more or less until kind of proper adulthood, was spent with you, playing games with you by and large. I mean, obviously we both played stuff separately, but that was a big part of our gaming lives back in our childhoods, was playing games together, talking about games together, setting aside the actual games for a second, but things like collecting the demo discs and reading the PlayStation magazines and that kind of thing.
Yeah, man, definitely.
Those were all really big parts of who we both were as gamers and who I was particularly. And I think a lot of that is why we're here now. I mean, this is essentially podcasting in sort of the modern version of the gaming magazine, and we're still sort of essentially doing that together.
I mean, this is basically the same conversations that we've been having our entire lives, dear listeners. Yeah. That is what this podcast is.
And yes, beyond that, I guess I've always had PlayStation consoles. I've had every PlayStation console now, including the PS5. I've never owned an Xbox console. I have a Nintendo Switch. That was my first owned Nintendo console. I did have a Game Boy Color when I was a kid, but literally only to play Pokemon Blue on, so it barely counts.
Well, Pokemon was the best game on it.
It was the only thing worth playing at that point, but for me at least. And as you'll have heard if you listen fairly regularly, I do play some PC games on a laptop now, but predominantly a console gamer, predominantly a PlayStation gamer, and I think that is the broad sweep of it. Mainly play story-driven games, have a lot of favourite series that I've been playing for years and years and years, like a lot of indie games as we do here on the PlayersToo podcast. But I've got, I think, a slightly varied list. I don't know how many will be surprises to you, Mark, maybe one or two, but I'm excited to sort of share. It was a tough list pulling this together, I've got to say. I thought it would be quite easy, and when I wrote out a bunch of games, I was just trying to remember stuff. I'm so tired right now that memory is difficult, and I pulled I pulled out some stuff from yesteryear, and I was like, oh god, I'm be really sad to leave that behind when I go off to this new island, but they've got to go, that's it.
Yeah, I must admit, when I was doing this, I found it surprisingly difficult to sort of narrow down the back end, I've got to say. Just one thing before we move on to the actual games themselves. You've never got any multiplayer games, have you, really, Lewis? You've always been a single-player man through and through.
Yeah, I think that's putting it generously. Yeah, multiplayer's never been a big part of my gaming lifestyle. Couch co-op, on the other hand, absolutely has been and always will be, but I don't really like, sort of from the PS3 generation onwards, the big move towards massive multiplayer games, headsets, team communication, all of that stuff. So it's going to be a fairly solitary island experience for old Lewis, but I'll enjoy it at least.
Fair enough, man. All right, well, let's get cracking with the games, I guess. What's your first one?
Well, my first one, I think, might be the only actually multiplayer game on my list, and it's going to be Tekken, Mark. It's got to be Tekken.
I did suspect it would be there, Liz, I have to admit.
Of no surprise to you, or I'm sure anyone else. Tekken was the original Tekken was the first game that I owned on the PlayStation 1. It goes back beyond that. Even the reason I got a PS1 was because my cousin, who lived just kind of around the corner from me, used to have it on his PS1 before that. I was way too young to be playing that or even seeing that game, really, but I remember it so vividly. I remember playing it even at that point, so I could only have been 3 or 4 years old. Fell in love with it, have loved it ever since. Will never stop playing it, I don't think. The one for me that I'm going to actually pick out of the series, I would be happy taking any of them, really. And part of me thought about taking Tekken Tag Tournament or Tekken Tag Tournament 2, just because they have the biggest rosters, essentially.
I was seriously tempted by Tekken Tag 2 as well, I have to admit.
But I guess I just prefer the baseline gameplay more than the tag mode itself. For that reason, I'm going, Mark, with Tekken 5 of all of the options.
That's interesting. It's
for a few reasons. I mean, it had a good roster. It was the start of some good additions to the series, but that's not really what I'm about in that, I have my core main characters that I love to play. I love the Mishima storyline. I mean, it's terrible, really, but I mean, I've been following it for 20 odd years, so I have to kind of put some investment in it. And this was the one, if you remember, Mark, that had probably the best intro sequence of any Tekken game, one of the best intro sequences of any game in my book. It follows immediately from the end of Tekken 4, which was also great, but it starts with the jack attack on the Mishima dojo that you start that game in.
Absolutely incredible. Yeah, that was properly. It cannot be overstated how awesome an intro sequence that was.
Breathtaking to see. And so that game for me, it sticks out among the series. I think they stripped out a couple of the things that they'd added in 4 to make it a bit faster and get it a bit closer to its original roots. I also think, I haven't double checked this, so I might be wrong, but I think it was before Rage Mode was introduced, which...
Oh, I thought this was the one where Rage Mode was introduced, actually.
It may be, and I don't hate Rage Mode the way that you do.
I detest Rage Mode.
But if I'm right in saying that, then particularly for that reason, this would be the latest one that I would want to take, I think, because it's a slightly different game after that. But so much of my gaming history, so many of my memories with you of gaming over the years have been taking part in fantastic, particularly team battles in the Tekken franchise, and I could not imagine not having it in my gaming life on this island.
I have to say, Lewis, I've done a quick Google of when Rage Mode was introduced in Tekken, and it does appear to be 6, so I think that you're right there.
Perfect. Yeah.
There you go. Absolutely bang on. Nice pick, man, I've got to say. I mean, I cannot argue with that. Tekken's amazing. I love Tekken. We both love Tekken. It was always going to be on your list, wasn't it? Let's be honest.
Pretty much, yep.
All right, man. What's your second game then?
My second one, Mark, maybe more of a surprise, I suppose. We spoke pretty recently on the podcast about FIFA and Pro Evolution Soccer and those franchises, and Pro Ev in particular was an enormous thing in my childhood and in my teenage years of gaming, and latterly even played a lot of FIFA. I'm taking neither of those games, Mark. But I wanted to mention them because I wanted to take a football game, because I love football. We don't talk about it too much on the show, but I'm a big football fan. I have loved football games of different kinds over the decades that I've been gaming. But I think the perfect thing to take to a desert island to finally give me the time that I want to spend on this game in the pit of my stomach and in the core of my soul, and that's going to be Football Manager. And I'm actually saying I don't care which Football Manager. Someone else can pack that for me. It can be the most recent one. It can be, I think the earliest one I played was 2008. The most recent I played was 2016, I want to say. Any of them, they barely change. It doesn't matter. It's just...
Actually, I would disagree with you, man. The last time I tried to jump into Football Manager, it was vastly more complicated than I remembered. I can tell you that much.
Possibly, yeah. But I mean, the last time I played at length was the 2016 game. So I'll say that one just for argument's sake. But, you know, they just evolve. It's kind of like jumping back into any of these things. But for me, Football Manager is just a joy and an addiction, and it's painful and it's beautiful, and I can imagine that I've spent more time in Football Manager than on any other game of any type in my whole gaming life, which feels mad to say, but I think that's probably true.
Yeah, you got really into it. I would say that we both had spells when we got really into it, but I don't think I ever got as deep as you. I don't think I ever got into those trenches as deeply as you did.
There was one summer in particular while I was at university. I was living away from home, and my flatmate at the time and my girlfriend at the time and all of my friends left the town for the summer. It's just the kind of place it was, and I was left there because I had a part-time job that I was doing. So I just had days and days on end where I would be in the flat alone, and there was very little else to do, and I just played Football Manager quite genuinely, Mark, from sort of the minute I woke up at noon to 2 in the morning, barely stopping to eat.
That's a very student lifestyle there, yeah.
Barely looking after myself, to be quite honest. I just played it endlessly. I loved it. That is why I don't play it now, is that I fear it because it is so addictive. But I love the tactical thinking behind it. I love trying to shape a team. I've always had a thing in gaming about attributes and trying to build teams of different attributes. It's why I think something like this rumoured Marvel XCOM game would be right up my street, because you get to just think, like, how do these people work together? That's a thing that I really love in all media, actually, but obviously it works really well in gaming. So Football Manager is going to be my football pick to take to the desert island.
Nice one, man. I was wondering if you would end up taking Pro Ev, was my immediate thought, but yeah, in hindsight, I'm really not surprised by Football Manager at all. I think when you first said that, I was like, oh, that's an interesting pick, but the more you've spoken about it, the more I'm thinking, yeah, that was definitely for him, yeah. Anyway, let's number 3.
Well, just because I slightly mentioned it there, I'm going to jump forward in my list a little bit, and my next game is going to be XCOM 2, Mark.
Wow, now that is very interesting. I like that pick a lot.
So this is a game that I actually haven't finished, and I haven't played all that much of it, in honesty. So this, I guess, could be considered my wild card in a certain sense. The reason that I know that I want to bring it is, and if anyone's been listening for a little while and heard me go on and on about how much I enjoyed XCOM Chimera Squad last year, and how much I enjoy this type of game, generally speaking. Another game on my list, Mark, that hasn't made the cut, but I was considering it, was Into the Breach, because of its because it's got that long-term playability. But XCOM 2 is sort of the grandfather, the daddy of all of these tactical strategy RTS games. And I think on the desert island, I'm going to want to keep my mind active, and I really think that XCOM is a great game for that. That's what I found about Chimera Squad. I could sit and play that and just, you know, because there's no action all the time, like you can stop and think and plan, and it's a bit like chess, you know, you can kind of think about, well, if I go here, they're going to move in this way, and then but if I flank them on this side, I've got a better chance, so on and so forth. And I just really like that kind of gameplay, and XCOM is the biggest and the best at this. It's got an enormous campaign. It has this added kind of base building feature that XCOM 2 had that Chimera Squad actually didn't have, and I don't know to what extent I would enjoy that, but again, it's more depth from my island gaming experiences. You know, you're going to want something that's meaty and that you can really get stuck into. And so, yeah, I really enjoy that kind of strategic gameplay. I think XCOM 2 is, or the XCOM universe generally, is an interesting world that is kind of political, and it's kind of dark in its presentation, but also slightly goofy and a bit daft, and certainly the characters in Chimera Squad were just kind of like a bit zany in their way, and I'm not sure how much of that creeps back into XCOM 2, but for me this would be the one that I would want to play to finally finish it, and yeah, I think I would really enjoy my time with it there.
Nice one, man. I like that pick a lot, I've got to say. Definitely for you. That is a game that I think, Desert Islands aside, you should get into again, because I think that you would really like it. Number 4 then, Liz.
My next one then, I guess, will be Hollow Knight, Mark.
Oh! That is a surprise. I love that.
I wasn't sure if that one would be a surprise to you or not, but yeah, you said at the top of this show, Mark, that this isn't necessarily my favourite 8 games, and these aren't necessarily my favourite 8 games, but there's basically no doubt in my mind that Hollow Knight is one of my favourite 8 games of all time.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that is incredible news. I did not know that. I'm very happy about this. I love Hollow Knight. I'm always feel like the Hollow Knight guy of the two of us, but yeah, Jesus, yes, I'm very happy with this selection. One of mine as well, the first one that we both picked.
Is that right? Yeah, I've got your list here, but I hadn't double checked. Yeah, I would still say that you probably are the Hollow Knight guy, because I mean my experience of it comes directly from you and from your enthusiasm and excitement around that game. I wouldn't have played it if you hadn't told me to, if you hadn't kind of made me. Not that I hadn't heard other people whose opinion I really respect sort of saying that this is one of the greatest games ever, but given the type of game it is, given the notorious difficulty that it can have, given its length, which was always a bit of an off-putter for me. I mean, in a lot of ways Hollow Knight is not a game that should have appealed to me, I think, but I can't describe how good it is to play. In terms of moment-to-moment gameplay, it is one of the smoothest, most enjoyable experiences. The combat is absolutely blissful. I mean, it's also awful, and it stresses you out. I've probably had more grey hairs created and lost some of them along the way while playing that game, particularly when fighting the Radiants at the end. But aside from that, Mark, aside from the gameplay, and a lot of the games that I'm pick are about their gameplay, because, you know, that's one of the core things, is that if you're going to pick any games, you want them to feel good, you want to have fun while you're actually playing them, and you don't necessarily just want a story that's going to be over straight away. Hollow Knight tells its story really interestingly. It's, as you've said countless times, it's more show than tell. It allows you to discover things at your own pace. It allows you to make inferences about the world that it's in. I think also, as you well know, Mark, I don't love the heat all that much, and I'm not sure that this desert island is going to do much for my waxy pale skin, and so something about playing Hollow Knight, which is a wet, dark, rainy game most of the way through, I love
that. That's tremendous.
I think it would just take me home, kind of thing. So,
I'm too Scottish for the desert island.
Exactly, yeah.
And Lewis is, to be clear, the whitest man alive, is insanely pale, and I might be the second whitest man alive. So
it's just the Scottish way. We've both got translucent skin, pretty much. But yeah, the world of Hollow Knight, if anyone who's listening to this hasn't played it, and we talk about it so much that I would hope that you would have at least looked into it, it's just a wonderful, wonderful experience. It is tough as nails, but when you get through it, that sense of achievement is almost unparalleled. Again, a couple of other games on my list that I'll maybe mention at the end that have that same kind of challenge and reward that Hollow Knight gives you, but few of them are really as enjoyable and as just as broad as Hollow Knight is. It's combat, it's exploration, it's, you know, using your charms and working out your best character builds, swapping all. I mean, again, talking about attributes when I was saying about Football Manager and XCOM to a certain extent, here we are again. It's all about moment to moment. Which battle am I going into? Which boss fight is this? So which charms do I need to have on? Which gear upgrades do I need? All of that stuff plays into it, and so you really have to think about what you're doing, which I think is again another thing that I really enjoy in games is when you get to make your own decisions about how to approach different challenges, and that the game actually allows any of them to work as long as you are good enough at them. I think that's something about Hollow Knight that we probably don't talk about enough, but that I really enjoyed about playing it. Yeah, man, that is awesome. I am thrilled with that pick for you. I can't say enough good things about Hollow Knight, so yes, 100%, I love that pick. I guess the one final thing about Hollow Knight is that it is so long, and there is a lot of replayability in it, and I've still never done the Colosseum of Fools, and I've never done the Grim Troop DLC, so there's content there that I've still got to do, and particularly challenging content at that, so I would definitely be getting stuck into that on the desert island. Love it, man, absolutely love it. I don't know how you can top that, frankly, but number 5 on you go. Well, I won't try and top it necessarily, but there's a franchise that I simply could not be taken to the island. You know, we've mentioned Tekken, obviously a big part of our gaming history. Metal Gear Solid, Mark.
What one?
Metal Gear Solid. And so, notably, this was an absentee from your list, and your reason for that, as I recall, was basically that, well, partly that you hadn't kind of had the call to play it again, and also that they are story-based games, and that in some ways it's not necessarily the best pick for the island, and I agree with that. And so, as I was saying about Football Manager, if someone else packed my bag and I just said to them, you have to chuck a Metal Gear game in there, I would be happy with whatever turned up, basically. But the one that I am going to pick, because I think it is the best stealth gaming experience of all time, of all games that I've ever played, is Metal Gear Solid 5.
Oh, wow. To be honest with you, I'm not as surprised about that as I maybe should be, to be honest, because I know that you sunk a ludicrous amount of hours into Metal Gear Solid 5.
I put an astonishing number of hours into Metal Gear Solid 5. I effectively played it through twice at the same time. I was playing that with my flatmate at the time, and we both had saves on our own profiles on my PlayStation, and we both put about 100 hours into each, and we more or less played them at the same time. You know, we just traded that off against one another, and so I played that so much. I never once got bored of it. The good thing about Metal Gear 5 for this sort of game, this Desert Island Games idea, is that it is way more replayable than the others, really.
That is true. That definitely is true. I'll give you that.
Because and ironically, it has the worst story and the least comprehensible or concluded story of any of the games.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, agreed. So definitely, story front, probably the weakest. Gameplay-wise or replayability-wise, definitely first by a considerable distance, I would say.
Absolutely. I mean, the stealth gameplay in that game, the move to an open world or a semi-open world, an expanded world or something like that, I guess we would say, that you can move around in, that you can take on missions at your own pace, and the options that it gives you within all of that. So things like the Fulton extraction, the ability to call in air support, the ability to call in a sandstorm. You could really layer on challenges. You could challenge yourself eventually. So not only was there the challenge of the missions themselves, whatever it was you were supposed to be doing, but the more you replayed and the more you were trying to kind of grind for money or whatever, the further on you went, you could kind of be like, I want to do this in a way where I never get seen, or I don't use any of these kind of tools, or I extract everyone from the base, or I kill everyone on the base, or whatever it may be. I mean, the story was fine. It wasn't particularly great, but the missions
fine.
The missions within the story, though, I found to be really fantastic most of the time. You know, there was so much that connected you up with the wider series. There was a lot of intrigue there about how different things could pair up, and that kind of resolved interestingly at the end in a way that I think was unfinished, but that's another story altogether. But yeah, for me, this game was just a total joy to play. I could play it for days and days and days and not get sick of it. It is just you know, we use this term sandbox a lot, and not only is it a sandbox because it's got loads of sandy environments and you can run about in them, but it is genuinely just like a big playground for Solid Snake or Big Boss or Venom Snake, as he was in this one. You know, you've got this super soldier, he can do extraordinary things, and in this game, for the first time out of any of them, you're just free to do that in your own way and play that however, and I just really loved that. That's why I would be taking it to the island over the other ones. All of them could make up the list. You know, you could have all 5 of the core games, but this would be the one.
Yeah, I have to admit I'd be a wee bit disappointed if 4 turned up, but I mean, overall they're all pretty damn good, I would say. I think that you've made a really solid case for that, actually. I think that you've changed my mind on it, because when you picked that, I thought, it's not maybe the greatest choice for the desert island setting, but actually the more you talked about that, the more I was thinking, you know what, yeah, this makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, because 1 and 3 are probably still up there as my favourite Metal Gear games, maybe overall.
I would agree. I think they're both the best in the series, but in terms of what you were talking about with the desert island, I think that this is the one, you know, definitely.
Absolutely, yeah.
Alright, list number 6.
Number 6 is maybe one that you would say I maybe shouldn't go with. This kind of bucks the trend of the other ones that I've been saying that are kind of about replayability and that longevity that they give you on the island. But for me, I don't think that I would want to go however long that I'm on this island without the opportunity to play this game again from start to finish. And that game, Mark, is Kentucky Route Zero.
Oh my god, I was not expecting that. Good Christ. You might as well take a book with you, man.
Well, I mean, it's funny that you say that, because that is partly why I thought of it, was in contrast to these other games, It is much more like a book. It is much more like a contained story. But because of that, it also, in a lot of ways, feels much more sort of rich and artistic and deep than most of these other experiences are. I mean, I'm not going to claim that Tekken 5 or Football Manager offer any real sort of emotional or intellectual depth. And as I said with one of the other games, I do want to keep the old ticker, the old noggin going, you know, and I need to keep the grey matter. I don't want to turn into Tom Hanks in Castaway, basically, and screaming at a volleyball.
Yeah, that's what all this is about, not turning into Tom Hanks in Castaway.
And so, yeah, I mean, I have talked about this game so often on this show, and, you know, me and you have talked about it off air plenty of times as well. I've probably drunkenly told people about it in the pub. I think about this game a lot, Mark, because to me, it's, in some ways, it's a playable novel or a series of kind of short stories or vignettes. I mean, there's quite literally a play within it that you have to play, which is,
yeah.
I don't know that there's any other games that have that. I fell in love with this hard. I fell in love with its writing, with its story, and with its storytelling, how it goes about giving you the information and how it lets you affect it in small ways, but not ways that can really fundamentally alter the experience. You know, you choose lines of dialogue, you choose certain questions to ask or whatever along the way that affects kind of your understanding of it, but doesn't mean that you or I had a different experience of the story overall, but just kind of put those wee spins on it. It has some moments in it that I think will remain with me as some of my absolute highlights in gaming forever. The one that comes to the top of my mind just now is when Junebug plays in the lower depths and you have to choose the song lyrics as you go along.
That was truly spectacular, to be fair.
I mean,
it really was
just gorgeous. Amazing. Just absolutely a gorgeous experience to play. And then there's the little shorter sections between the main 5 chapters. So if anyone doesn't know this game, it was released over 7 years in total, and 5 chapters. Between each one had a shorter playable kind of interlude, and it has that play like structure there. And again, one of those interludes is literally a play that ties in with the wider narrative that you're also playing through. I mean, it's just hyper inventive. It is gorgeous. It's got everything that I want from a type of game like this. I mean, it doesn't have the gameplay like Metal Gear Solid 5 has, absolutely not, but
Jesus Christ, no, definitely not that.
But yeah, I would hate to not be able to just dip into this maybe once a year on the island, just to kind of feel that feeling again, and to hear that goddamn soundtrack, Mark. I listen to that so much.
Yeah, the soundtrack in the game is incredible. Do you know what, man? Again, I said all that stuff at the beginning where I was like, oh, you might as well take a book, and then you've sort of turned that around on me, and that is almost kind of the point. Yeah, I've got to say, again, for you, I actually think that is sort of like probably a pretty good choice, really. Buttless, number 7 now.
Number 7, so just 2 more to go. Well, the next one, again, partly about keeping that brain switched on. I have a bunch of puzzle games on my list and various games like that I would maybe have taken, but I had forgotten about this game, and when I saw it, when I was just checking a wee list of some old PS3 games, and I was immediately like, of course it's that, and I can't believe I never thought of it, and that's Portal 2, Mark.
Oh, wow. There we go. I like that a lot.
Portal 2 is just incredible. And if people haven't played it yet, you still haven't played it, right?
I have not. I've sort of dabbled in Portal, but I've never like properly played it.
Yeah, I mean, Portal 2, man, oh my god. As a puzzle game, as a series of challenges like that you have to solve using the physics of the portal gun. Literally, if you've never even heard of this game, you shoot 2 portals, one orange, one blue. You walk into one, you come out of the other. Simple as that, you would think. But it is a layered puzzle experience that challenges you to really think about how to use that tool and what it can do, how to use momentum, how to manipulate the space around you. And then you get some other tools as well. You get some paint that makes you bounce around some more and things like that kind of augment the gameplay. But at its core, I mean, it's so simple, it's so beautifully simple that it is just basically like, if you had a gun that you could shoot 2 portals with, what could happen? But on top of that is this story that the game it shouldn't deserve, and it just is so good. It is hysterical. It is so well written. It's got great voice acting from Stephen Merchant playing your kind of robot assistant. There's the return of GLaDOS from the first game as this kind of overarching villain in the series. I mean, there's so many memes, there's so many gaming jokes that have come out of the Portal series, but Portal 2 is a longer experience, it's a deeper experience than the first game. It just has this, this rundown, broken factory world that you're in, that you're just trying to escape. You never really know all that much about you yourself while you're playing it, but it is just about getting through these challenges, working out what the hell's going on, and trying to get out. And oh man, it's just so good. There's a co-op mode as well, there's a 2-player mode that I think you only unlock once you've beaten the game, but it too is really fantastic. I can't recommend this enough. I love puzzle games. I have a lot on my kind of wider list here, but this to me is just that perfect blend of so many different things into this complete package.
Nice one, man. I like that a lot. As I said, I've not played a lot of Portal, so I can't comment on this too much, but to me it's one of those things in gaming that it's sort of ridiculous that I haven't played it. I accept that. So to see it make an appearance on this list really probably shouldn't have surprised me as much as it did, to be honest, because I know how much that you love that game.
Yeah, it feels like so long since I've played it as well. It would be great to have that time with it again.
Yeah, man, definitely. All right, Liz, best for last, is it?
Well, it's sort of, yeah. I guess this is the one, it's another one that we shared on our list. I'm sure you had this and you're thinking about what I was going to say on this show. It's The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, isn't it, Mark?
Of course it is, Liz. Of course it is.
It's got to be. I mean, not only, as you were saying when you did this before, and I really would recommend that anyone who's listening to this who didn't hear Mark's episode, it was from September 2020, we'll put the link to it in the show notes so that you can go back and check it out, because it works as a really good companion, I think, to this one. And interesting listening to yours back, because there's certain games that you hadn't played yet that would definitely be on your list now. Yeah,
I was listening to it back as well, just in preparation for doing this episode as well, and I was thinking, would I change this now? Would I change this? There was a lot of weird little things that I said in that I was thinking, I wonder how Mark of today would actually compile this list, Yeah, definitely, yeah. So you had Breath of the Wild on yours as well, and as you said at that point, I mean, not only does it work so well for being on a desert island, because in a lot of ways it itself feels like a desert island game. You're just exploring this enormous environment that has a bit of everything going on in it. There's desert, there's mountains, there's sea and islands and everything. I mean, the superlatives for this game are unending. It is a masterpiece in my eyes. It is a complete joy to play. Like a lot of the games that I've mentioned on this list, it is about giving the player the creativity and the tools to approach things as they want. So that starts off from the ability to go from the starting point to immediately fight the final boss if you want. You can do that. Yeah, absolutely. It makes speedruns of this game very interesting, I'll tell you that much.
You can choose which order to tackle the divine beasts in. You simply stumble across shrines a lot of the time. You're not even necessarily looking for them. And in comparison to something like Skyward Sword that I'm playing just now, which is hyper-linear in comparison, which just leads you from dungeon to dungeon. I mean, thinking back to playing Breath of the Wild and just how open that was and how big of a revelation that was for the series, I think it's hard to overstate that, really, that it completely reinvented things and will surely change open world games forever in certain senses.
Oh yeah, I think that we're already seeing that, to be honest. And for me, Breath of the Wild is, and I don't think that this is an overstatement at all, it's comfortably one of the best games ever made. I don't know where a lot of people would rank it, but for me, and I know for you, it is easily one of the best games ever made, and as you said, really took what is a tired open world genre, in my opinion, or by the time that it was coming out,
absolutely.
It was a bit tired. To try and avoid using a pun here, but totally breathed fresh air in it. It really did. It totally changed everything. It totally changed how I felt about open worlds. It totally changed what I wanted from an open world, what I could expect from an open world. The sense of freedom in Breath of the Wild is unparalleled in any other game, as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely, yeah, 100% to all of that. It was a tired genre up to that point, typified by the bloated Ubisoft collectathon model of, just go to all these checkpoints on the map and do whatever you're supposed to do there. And I remember
Breath of the Wild done the opposite thing. They went, here's a map, but there's nothing on it.
I mean, I remember the first time I even read that in a preview or a review of the game, and it was sort of pointing out this thing of the map is completely open, and how you navigate it is basically a case of looking in the actual game world and going, that over there looks interesting, or what's that peak over there in the distance? I'm just going to head towards that, and I might put a little marker on the map and just head off in that direction. That to me was wow, really genuinely, that sounds like an astonishing thing that we don't have just now. And I say that as someone who used to love the Assassin's Creed games, loved the Arkham games, loved the GTA games, loved the Shadow of Mordors of the world, all that kind of stuff. that was those just kind of like clear a tower. Like, I really liked a lot of those games, and when Breath of the Wild came along, it changed everything. It sold me a Switch, it started me on my Nintendo journey. I've now played subsequent Zelda games. I want to keep playing more. It made such an enormous impact. I put so many hours into it, and again, I just could not fathom going to this island without it.
That is an absolutely fantastic choice. And I obviously completely paralleled it when I was compiling this list as well. I couldn't imagine picking a list of games like this to go to a desert island with and that not being on it. Because not only is it so perfect for the situation, for being stranded on a desert island, only with a fantasy games console to keep you company, you know. But it is, again, as I said, in my opinion, one of the best video games ever made. So, yes, stellar list. I've got to say, I like it a lot. I really do.
Thanks very much. Yeah, great fun putting it together, and I imagine I would have quite a good time.
Yeah, man, I love it. On the desert island, I would love to take this list as well, I have to say. So,
nice.
Yeah, I think that's great, man. I think that's really, really good. Not quite finished yet, Lewis. Just want to ask you a couple of final questions, as you did to me. If you had to take a 9th game, Lewis, that you hadn't played yet, you hadn't played at all, what would that be?
One that I've never played at all. It's a tricky one. One that I was thinking of before, and I don't think I would take this because I think the novelty would wear off. It might make me feel a bit sad altogether. Was Microsoft Flight Simulator.
I like that. I like that as an answer.
Just to escape a little bit. But no, and it's maybe not the most adventurous, but just, I guess, following on a little bit from Breath of the Wild, Ocarina of Time.
Oh, wow.
And to a certain extent, Majora's Mask. But Ocarina of Time is a game that just sits there in the back of my head as one of these totemic, like Mario 64, which I've still not actually played either, but I do own that. I just can't face it yet. It's just one of those games that everyone talks about, everyone loves, who was, playing games on Nintendo at that point. Seems to be absolutely pivotal to the series overall. And given how much I loved Breath of the Wild and how much I'm enjoying Skyward Sword and loved Link's Awakening, I could imagine a world, if I had limitless time, where I would just want to work through all of the Zelda games. And so maybe this would be the one, if it had to be a 9th.
Nice one, man. I like that. All right, Lewis, if you had to take a 10th game, here we go, of a game that you either failed to complete or wish that you could have played more, now that you have infinite time on this desert island, what would that be?
Oh man, that is a good additional question there. Yeah, a couple of things pop to mind immediately. Most of them coming from Software, funnily enough. Bloodborne is up there. Bloodborne is probably the one that I'm going to go with. I played a bit of Sekiro and really liked that, and would quite like to have put some more time into that. And I've never played either Dark Souls or Demon Souls, so I wouldn't mind those. One, actually, that I had been thinking about for your previous question, which was Hades, which I haven't ever played and would really love to play. In the similar vein is Returnal, that I started and was really enjoying.
That's interesting.
And never went back to. I don't have a PS5 game on my list, I don't think, and that would maybe be the one that I would be most interested in kind of picking up and really diving into some more. But again, for that longevity and for something that I'm determined to play, well, I have to play and have to finish. So assuming I'm getting sent away to this desert island before this year's Game Awards, I guess I'll take Bloodborne and finally get through it.
Yeah, that is a standing bet between me and Lewis, that Lewis lost and his punishment is to complete Bloodborne by this year's Game Awards. And you're running out of time, by the way.
I am running out of time, but I've got September in mind for it, big time.
Very good, very good. And Lewis, because nothing ever runs smoothly in the world, your boat sinks. You can only grab one game to take from that list to the desert island. And just to recap, Tekken 5, Football Manager, XCOM 2, Hollow Knight, Metal Gear Solid 5, Kentucky Route Zero, Portal 2, Breath of the Wild, and I'll even throw in Ocarina of Time and Bloodborne. What one would you grab?
I think, Mark, it would be Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, that's what I chose too. It's a bit boring to say that, though.
It is a little bit, and I would say that with a really heavy heart, because leaving something behind like Tekken that I just know I could play limitlessly, I could just play it forever and never really get bored. leaving behind something like Metal Gear Solid 5, knowing that I could just never ever experience anything from Kentucky Route Zero again. I would never be in Dirtmouth heading off on my adventure in Hollow Knight. All of them. To lose all of those games would be devastating, but Breath of the Wild is, you were saying there, it's one of the best games ever made in your opinion. I think that for me it probably is the best game that I've ever played.
Literally the best one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it's the best game ever made, I suppose, but I think...
your favourite game ever is your favourite game.
Yeah, and there's just so much to it, and I don't think that you could ever really, truly get bored of it. Maybe eventually on the island, and you might start wishing you'd picked something that never could end, but to run around in Hyrule like that again, that would be the one, I think.
Yeah, man, that's cool. I mean, for me, it was obviously the same, and I think that if I ever did get to a point where I was bored with it, I would just start a new game, and then I wouldn't be again.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Liz, I think that is a fantastic list. Genuinely, I think that was really, really good. A few wee surprises in there for me, I have to say, but overall, very good, and I think you will thoroughly enjoy yourself on this, Diz, alright? Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we will have to call it a day there. I'd like to remind everyone that you can find PlayersToo on all the social media. That is Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com. That's PlayerStoo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really, really, really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. I know I say this twice a week, every week, but it does not become less important on a weekly basis. It only takes you 5 seconds, and it really genuinely does help us out. So thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. I'd like to remind everyone that our play-along game is Little Nightmares, a game that neither of us have played, but I think have both been very interested in playing for a long time. This will also tie into October. At the start of October, it will be finishing the first Little Nightmares, and at the end of October, we will be playing Little Nightmares 2. So just in case you can buy those 2 games in a bundle, that is the next 2 months worth of play-along games, and I'm really looking forward to playing them around Halloween because it is very fitting.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got this interesting little Halloween 1-2 across September and October, and yeah, I think particularly Little Nightmares 2 really caught my eye when it released, I think just over a year ago now, and I think getting stuck into the start of this series is going to be great, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too, really looking forward to it. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next week.
Thanks.